Let's begin with this story about keeping of the judiciary and the swearing in of the new EACC Chief Executive Officer. And now we have the trio of George Kinoti as the DCI, the Director of Criminal Investigations. We have Nordin Haj as Director of Public Prosecutions. And now we have Twalib Mbarak as the CEO of EACC. What are your expectations in as far as this is concerned? Is it going to boost the fight against graft, or are we still going to face challenges at the court, like has been attributed to by several leaders in government and the opposition?
I think first and foremost is to congratulate Mr. Twalib because I know it was a very tough competition for him to get the job. But I really admire Kinoti and Nordin. I mean, they've done a great job. I think recently they were given Chief of the Order of the Burning Spear, by His Excellency the President, joining the likes of us. You know, it's good to say that. They think that EACC, under the leadership of Bishop Wabukala, should do is to ensure that we have preventive measures with regards to corruption. I know his declaration is that people will not enjoy their wealth. And the link is very clear. I mean, if you are to do lifestyle audits, you clearly show that people are earning more than their keep. And it's all the, you know what, when people are flaunting their ill-gotten wealth, nobody asks. In fact, it's very blatant, and it's just vomiting on our shoes, as the former ambassador to Kenya from Britain once said, Edward Clay. So that is really, it remains to be seen. I think there is goodwill. And I can also see the frustration, of course, in the same story about Maraga and him defending the judiciary, which is the weakest link in the fight against corruption, because... You believe so? Judicial officers are human beings, and they are equally corrupt, like any other. This idea of people being presented here as angels, who, because you appear before a judge, nothing can happen, it's totally hogwash. I mean, we know that justice is available sometimes to the highest bidder in this country, and that sometimes people are very keen on sharing the loot.
Is this happening in the current judiciary?
Yes, it is.
Because the Chief Justice says that all these cases will be determined on the basis of the strength of the evidence presented before court.
Yeah, evidence. What is evidence? Sometimes that evidence means that how much money is your evidence. That is the truth. That is the truth. You know, you can argue and say, you can hide in legal jargon, but the truth of the matter is that there seems to be some influence. In fact, some of the judgments that you come across, they seem to support a certain narrative, but the final verdict is totally different. So that you find somebody is just using the law to justify a predetermined end. And then what would be the motivation? In fact, my take is that Chief Justice David Maraga himself, because I've had interactions with him, he is very clear on what needs to be done. And he is very keen on transforming judiciary. But the judiciary reeks of corruption, the judiciary reeks of tribalism, and I think for me, I can say this without fear of doubt, that he seems to be an isolated man. He's a man at the helm, who has very good intentions, but below him, thugs and crooks, dressed in the regalia of justice.
Whoa, that's quite a statement. Mheshimiwa Osoro, you're also a lawyer. No, not also. You are a lawyer. And there is what he says, which a section of Kenyans think that's the position. A section of politicians believe that there is trading of justice at the judiciary. How possible is it? I don't want to ask you whether this is happening. I'm just asking, how possible is it that you as a lawyer and the accused persons or even the prosecution side can use resources, can finance or can buy justice at the courts?
I strongly want to dissociate myself with sentiment made by my colleague in regard to the judiciary. And I'll refer him to the hierarchy of courts. Our legal system, or rather our courts, have a hierarchy. It starts from the lower courts, the magistrate courts, all through to the high court, to the court of appeal, and now to where Maraga sits. Maraga sits at the Supreme Court. Now, what most people need to know is that we use what we call common law legal system, where we use jurisprudence, we use different, decided matters to define cases that are before court. And the threshold to define, or rather to decide a criminal matter, must be beyond reasonable doubt. That the prosecution must prove any matter beyond reasonable doubt. If there is an iota of doubt before the judiciary or before the bench, then that one is, that matter will not see the light of the day. What happens in this country is that there is the public justice, and then now there is legal justice, the normal legal justice system. The public have a presumption that once one is presented before court, he is already guilty. So what they want to hear, or what they want to see, is that person jailed, whether there is evidence provided before the court or not. And at times you see people, you know, abusing advocates, you know, forgetting that advocates are also, you know, officers of the court. Right. So I want to say it clearly that in as much as there could be some, which we hear, I'm not very certain about, that there is an issue of bribery and stuff like that within the judiciary. I mean, we haven't seen any person again presented before court over the same. And if one has issue with the lower court, there is always another avenue for justice. The DPP has an avenue to appeal. In the higher court. All right, Silvanus Sosoro. And if Senator claims that Maraga is very clean, which is okay, and I support him that, then push the matter all through to the Supreme Court, where he sits.
Look at you. So, the Law Society of Kenya has said that it's going to sue over arrest in work-related issues. That is on page 6 of the Daily Nation. The Law Society of Kenya wants a court to stop the arrest and harassment of advocates over work-related matters. The lawyers' body also wants advocates released on free bond whenever they are arrested over work-related issues. Now, this is an association, the Society of Lawyers in the country, that is pushing for this agenda. So one might wonder, how do you... There are those accusations that he's leveling against lawyers, and then there is the reality, and then there is what the Law Society of Kenya is pushing for.
You know, when you read the Advocates Act, Section 55, lawyers are defined as officers of the court. And they not only defend their clients, but they help court realize justice. In defining legal matters, they help the judge or the magistrate or whoever is at the bench to come up with a just decision. Charging a lawyer on matters professional, yet we've got professional bodies, or actually we've got a disciplinary unit within the Law Society. You know, when one has an issue with an advocate, I mean, you can always present the same before the LSK, before the Law Society of Kenya, and have the lawyer questioned. Charging a lawyer within the professional line, what probably I could say negligence or something that happened within the profession, my view, that is not right. Okay. And I support what the LSK is saying, that you do not... I don't, you do not have one. I don't know why. I think, let me know what.
No, let me first introduce my guest so that we can come to you. Member of Parliament for Mathare constituency, Anthony Oluoch, karibu sana. Happy New Year.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you.
Ulikuwa kwa traffic?
No traffic. I got caught up trying to prepare my daughter to get to school, and she wouldn't do it as fast as I could. Okay, I have to balance public duties and private.
Fathers and
yes.
That's important. I think she'll remember you more for that than what you're doing here. But all the same, welcome to this discussion, and you're at that point, I'm sure you've been listening, you're at that point of asking ourselves, is it a possibility that a lawyer can get involved in such kind of allegations that politicians have been leveling against them? And he says that a lawyer in the line of their work should not be taken to court for what may be deemed to be unprofessionalism or maybe corruption. It should be taken through the Advocates Disciplinary Committee. Is there anything that stops a prosecutor, a public prosecutor, from pursuing a lawyer involved in such kind of allegations?
Actually, there isn't. I mean, if you look at the duties and the constitutional mandate given to the Director of Public Prosecution, and of course, by extension, the agencies that do investigations, they work under the direction of no one, and so long as this is in the penal code and in the four corners of our laws, nobody is immune from that. The same that you would say about an act of parliament that was being brought or supposedly was to be brought,
right.
Giving some quote-unquote immunity to members of parliament against prosecution. I think there is what now you call a thin line that needs to be defined between what lawyers do in the course of their duties on behalf of their clients, same to what parliamentarians say in debate in the course of their duty, and whether you can go and prosecute them. The reason that I say that in respect of lawyers is this: the potential for abuse is very high. Lawyers conduct what is almost complementary to what the courts do, and my friend, colleague here has correctly says that lawyers are officers of the court. If a judge cannot be impugned or arrested or made responsible for what he says in his judgment, it's called the decisional independence of the judiciary. A lawyer, similarly, an officer of the court, should not be indicted or prosecuted for that. Okay. The reason then, thirdly, that why we must defer to the professional organization is for the same reason that I thought it would have been neater for the DPP to allow the Judicial Service Commission to handle the case of the DCG. There is nothing, of course, that stopped him from doing that, but it is simply neater that a judge, sitting judge and the second in command in the judiciary, being arraigned in a court of law when you have disciplinary processes, and a neater way of saying, let's put a tribunal. Right. So I think that in order to avoid abuse, it is better that our prosecutorial agencies defer to the disciplinary processes, because there is what you call professional misconduct, and lawyers can misconduct themselves. Lawyers can misuse and misappropriate money. But I think it is better that we defer to the disciplinary internal processes of LSK.
All right, and the new EACC Chief Executive Officer, Twalib Mbarak, says that he is seeking to inject life into the ethics and anti-corruption. He says that you not enjoy graft money. New EACC boss warns, and he is quoted saying that you should be very afraid should you be involved in such kind of offences or allegations. Do you think this is going to yield too much in as far as fighting this graft war? Is it just talk like we have seen with previous officials?
I am not too enthusiastic. You remember, we've had all sorts of quotes, jesters and poets and people coming and saying all manner of things about slaying the dragon of corruption, and when they come in, there is a lot of energy, enthusiasm, but then they realize that the process of trying to deal with corruption is actually very difficult, and especially the one for the EACC. It's more politicized, it's more inclined towards being, I'm not saying abused, but going to the whims of the politics of the day. You remember there was a time that an EACC was disbanded because Parliament felt uncomfortable with it. And then as recent, until the President decided to step into this, EACC simply went into a slumber. They woke up and the President took up the mantle itself. So I wish him the best. But I also occupy the position, and I've said that here before, that I think that EACC should be disbanded, and in its place, I think what they do should be a directorate, fully equipped directorate within the department, a department within the DPP.
Wow. Okay. So, and of course, we understand that the trial of NYS 2 fraud suspects began yesterday, and the prosecution is promising to present evidence that will incriminate all the suspects. We see that the prosecution led by Ms. Vera Misi will show how Lillian Mbogo Omolo, the principal secretary who has since been suspended, he was then the accounting officer. He did not, she did not use the funds in accordance with the law. Did not consult Parliament and the Treasury. And this officer is quoted saying that through graphics and charts, we shall demonstrate how public funds from the Exchequer allocated to the Ministry of Public Service were siphoned to fictitious companies through NYS in the guise of procurement. So the Chief Justice says that cases will be decided on the strength of the evidence. We just hope that this evidence will be incriminating enough. Isaac Mora, you wanted to say something to what Osoro was saying, just in closing. What was that in 30 seconds?
I don't know whether you can expect a goat to get justice in the court of highness, because they will find a way of concluding that this animal is equal for eating. And that is what I see of my friend Silvanus Osoro, my good brother, because he's just here to defend his law profession, to the point that when the law society mechanisms of discipline have failed, he expects us to still go back to that court of highness to get justice. Lawyers are involved in any crooked deals in this country, and they are also involved in defending those crooks.
All of them?
There's a profession, I'm talking generally, not all of them. In every crooked deal, you find a lawyer. In every quest for justice or injustice, you find a lawyer. And so they cannot come here to pontificate themselves as the people who, they actually miscarry justice. Because if you listen to Osoro here, you listen to Anthony Oluoch, my brother, and any other lawyer, all of them are usually right. All of them, they are usually right. And they would want to come and tell us, but you see, law is not an end unto themselves. That is why Jesus Christ said that he did not come to make laws. I came to fulfill the law through other means. Because it's not really about the letter of the law. It's about the spirit. And that in itself, I mean, people know how to circumvent. In fact, there seems to be other incentives that make judges to make their conclusions. For sure, it can be very interesting that you would expect judges to prosecute their fellow colleagues when they are accused, or even to rule that they have been found corrupt. But I would also want to say, if for sure they are very faithful to the law, if for sure they are true judges and they lay claim to being impartial and beyond reproach, then they would do exactly the same, so that they can incriminate their own and flush them out, so that they can be left those who can stand for the true common, defense of the monarchy. Yes. But of course, we hear stories about tribunals. It's more neater, so that lawyers can get more legal fees, and the process is prolonged, and then we can have, the way Anthony Oluoch has said about court poets, regaling us with the stories and good English, and eventually we forget and move on to the next story. I mean, we've learned these things now.
Just in closing on that topic.
30 seconds. When I walked in, I think I need to weigh in on that. The last bastion of justice and what is now what would save the people from a system that has collapsed is the rule of law and a proper functioning judiciary. And whereas we know that the judiciary has its own pitfalls, I think as public representatives, we should be very careful not to erode confidence in this system called the judiciary. To make the kind of blanket statements that as Isaac Mora is making, I think, quote unquote, for me would be treasonable. Because not all judges and not all judgments and not all decisions are procured through bribery or what he seems to be suggesting is impropriety. I am sure that he's been processed. I am sure that he's been processed in very, very many instances where he has gone through a system, and thanks to that system and a judgment and decision that were made, he got justice. But to come here and go ballistic, as he's doing, eroding the confidence in the judiciary. Chief Justice Maraga said yesterday, and I agree with him, that bring cases that are prosecutable. There are two balances that needs to be made. The President and the Prime Minister have said they want corruption to be fought, but and at the same time, we need to process these things quickly and expeditiously. That is agreed. But please bring a case that is airtight.
Okay. All right.